and the Public Safety Committee. As we begin, and I'm going to ask Ms. Farag, who, as always, has done a marvelous job on preparing this packet. I'm going to ask her to go through it with us. And the topic is the Executive Regulation 0423, Police Private Security Camera Incentive Program. I'm going to turn it over to the committee co-chair of the Joint Committee today, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, and see if she has any opening statements.
I do not have any opening statements, but I'm ready for a discussion.
All right. Any other committee members? No. And we are being joined, as I can see as I look up, with Councilmember Laurie Ann Sales as well. And with that, we would like to welcome the Chief and others on the panel. Chief, do you have any opening statements?
Good morning. I do,
okay,
Mr.
please.
Chair. Yes. So good morning to all of our council members. Thank you all for allowing us to speak to this executive regulation in regards to the private security camera incentive rebate program. One of the things I think that in today's environment with the invent, if we want to say that, but the availability of cameras to many of our residents, both in the business community as well as in private residential, is that we're seeing these cameras grow expeditiously throughout the county. But there are areas that I think that probably can benefit from the usages of these cameras from a safety perspective, and I think this is the most important piece of this. We are seeing incredible results as a result of investigative leads in order to be able to help identify individuals that may be involved in criminal activity or events that we've had throughout the county in a variety of different types of crimes. I'll give a case in point what just happened this past weekend. This past weekend we had an individual in the Silver Spring area attempt to abduct a 2-year-old on the streets of Silver Spring. And the parents who were very alert at the time were able to get the individual to release the kid, and the suspect actually walked away and escaped the scene at that very moment. Our patrol officers responded as they were called to the scene. There were cameras in the vicinity that they were able to access, and as a result of their accessibility, they were able to identify this individual as an individual they've dealt with in the Silver Spring community over the past few weeks. Therefore, having that individual identified, they were able to actually locate him and actually place him under arrest as a result of the cameras. So that's just a example. One example, I should say, that is, it just shows you that can be beneficial. Otherwise, you know, we don't know how long it would have taken us to solve that particular attempted abduction. There again, when we talk about other types of crimes, particularly in the violent crime realm, we have not only are we able to utilize some video footage that individuals will allow us to access, whether via subpoena or whether they provide that information to us willingly. But what we also note is the fact that this video is utilized in court prosecutions that are very benefit in order to be able to make sure that we have, again, the evidence to support the individual who is being charged in such crimes. When we talk about in this bill, it notes about priority reporting areas, and I'm sure that this is going to be part of the discussion that we'll have today of how do we really identify those areas based upon the crime statistics and data that we collect, and working with our different communities, whether it's our residential community, whether it's the business, or a combination of both, because we do know we have some mixed use business and residential. So, I will speak to that. Again, I think, when we look at some of the dynamics of all of our district investigators, I'm seeing and hearing from our investigators, our detectives, our officers who are actually going out collecting. This is a part of their norm as collecting this, and they have provided significant the solvability rate in many of their cases increases. What is a large increase as a result of many of these types of technologies that are in place right now. It doesn't solve every crime, but the reality, it gives us a better opportunity to solve many crimes, to at least to have the descriptions of individuals who may be committing such set offenses, and to be able to better communicate that with the public. So I'll stop there, and again, I think this is a major benefit to the community. We are committed to being as transparent and working with our communities as to the areas which are going to be identified based upon the data that we will present.
Thank you very much, Chief. I did also want to acknowledge that Dr. Earl Stoddard is here, as well as Lieutenant Dan from the County Exec Office, and Lieutenant Dan Helton, who's with Management Services Bureau from the Montgomery County Police. Did you? No? Okay. Well, with that, we're going to turn it over to Ms. Farag to lead us through, please.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This proposed regulation will implement Bill 423 that Council passed last year, the purpose of it is to deter crime by incentivizing the installation of security cameras in geographical areas that are experiencing relatively high incidents of crime. And as we've talked about in prior public safety meetings, safety is not experienced equally across the county, right? There are hot spots of crime that might have to be addressed in different ways than areas that see very little crime. So since the pandemic, certain types of crime have increased. In the first quarter of 2023, violent crime increased by 7% and nonviolent crime increased by 3% over the same period of last year. There has been ongoing community interest in this program, and over the past year, the council has received various calls and letters from residents seeking information on the program. And just for your awareness, the District of Columbia has a similar program. This program is permitting a voluntary coordination between the public and the police. It's 100% voluntary as far as who wants to install cameras and then sign up for the program. This co-production of public safety between community members and police is a best practice. People want to feel power over how they get their safety. People want to be protected by police. They don't want to be occupied by police. So when there's this proactive community engagement, the results are much better. At the same time, it of course raises privacy concerns, and that was addressed during the bill discussions by council, and there was an amendment made to ensure that people do not direct their cameras to unnecessarily record somebody else's private property. So the bill requires regulations to address the methodology used to identify a priority area, the permissible collection, dissemination, use, and disposal of images, and minimum standards for security cameras purchased under the program. The regulations do that. I would say it's a pretty lax type of description. I think there's much more room for the department to better identify particular areas in the county, not just by a police district, which is very large, looking at crime hotspots, and particularly where, small businesses, to make sure that the access to this program is equitable. And the few questions that I've put out there for potential discussion questions address that. The privacy issues as far as disposal of footage, access to ensure that people who really need it are the ones who are going to be accessing the program, and funding. Apparently, the District of Columbia goes through $500,000 very easily every year through requests, right? There's $255,000 approved in the FY24 budget for this. It's one thing that I'd like to speak to Dr. Stoddard about, which I have not yet, but if there is a potential to access FEMA reimbursement funds for one-time additional funding of this, depending on how applications go, you may possibly see a huge ramp up of applications this year that taper off in later years. And I just wanted to specify that if you are capable of adding FEMA reimbursement funds as a supplemental appropriation, that would have to be one time only and would not be built into the base for FY25.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lukey. Well, Dr. Stoddard, did you want to answer that about FEMA funds?
Yeah, so the FEMA funds come back to the general fund and certainly would be at the discretion of the council to appropriate based on how it sees fit. I can tell you right now, we'll be making a notification of the first $8.8 million that we've actually received back into the county. And we're expecting somewhere in the range of $100 million over the course of this fiscal year that will be coming in from FEMA based on our preliminary. And when I say preliminary, we've had a lot of conversations about FEMA reimbursement before. These are funds these are estimates that are based on what we've submitted to FEMA and the feedback they've given us on what we've submitted already. And so I feel pretty confident in saying that we'll be getting a substantial sum of money, much more than the additional $250,000 that was discussed. So that would be at the discretion of the council, but I certainly think the county executive, based on the fact that his recommended budget did include a bit more, but we could certainly make that number for this year more whole with FEMA funds.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey, please.
Thank you, Chair Katz. I have a couple questions for you. So the way this currently reads, it uses, it says one or more police districts. And I'm assuming, though, that it would not be every district-wide, that within that, this would allow the flexibility to target specific areas within each district, because our police districts are fairly large geographically.
So good morning again, Dan Helton. So yes, exactly. So like Susan Farag mentioned, not every area within a police district experiences crime the same way, right? So they're very big. You look at Walkerville District, goes from Poolsville down here to the Mixon Bowl.
Right.
Same thing with Silver Spring, Howard County line all the way to downtown. So the plan is to use our PRAs, which is our police reporting areas, and those get pretty small. And I'll give you an example of a PRA size would be downtown Silver Spring. You'd have from like Georgia Avenue to Fenton Street, Colesville down to Wayne. All right, it gives you a good idea of what's going on. So the PRAs work well for us because they're small enough to capture the information. Also for our GIS mapping system, or our geographic information system, which is going to pull from this. So we created a heat map. We created a heat map using our e-justice report. That's the police reports that we do. It goes back every 2 years. It's live. It updates every 2 days, and it pulls the incidents. And those incidents range from homicides, robberies, assaults, burglaries, larcenies, auto thefts, vandalisms, weapons incidents. So this heat map plots these little octagons over the county, right? And then we can narrow those down by the PRAs and say, relative to the rest of the district, where are we experiencing a lot of these incidents? And that's how we use that objective data to get us there. Now we're not going to stop there, because the district commanders, for example, also have an idea of what's going on in their districts, and they might say, hey, this part too. And then also our community members that we work with say, hey, what about this part here? So that's the idea moving forward for this.
And do you feel that the language that's used in the proposed regulation gives you enough agility to make sure that you're able to adjust accordingly throughout time with the program's objectives?
I do. So it was intentionally built to give us some flexibility, to be kind of basic, right? So we can have that flexibility. We didn't want to fence ourselves in with policy and not be able to adjust, right? Because technology may change, we all of a sudden may be able to narrow things down a little bit better. So that's our plan.
And I know as Ms. Farag was walking through the packet, she did mention privacy concerns, but this is video only and includes no audio, correct? So it's fully compliant with Maryland's wiretapping statute consent requirements?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned that there would be appropriate access controls that are departmental policy for accessing the data, and that would follow, I am guessing you have those processes in place already based on who needs to know what to perform their job functions. Could you describe how that would work in greater detail with respect to the video access?
So I think what happens is that those who would participate in the program would grant us access, and we would have that in the application process that would be documented as such. Again, should we, there's information that we want to gather. There are always ways that we can also, we could always subpoena the data through the use of the courts and the state's attorney's office. Should that be necessary, which is generally the process we utilize now.
Right.
So we will generally go to any individual, whether it's a private residence or whether it's a business owner, to see if they would allow us access to see the video. And if should they ask us for a subpoena, we would be more than willing to be compliant before we would gather such data.
Okay. And then in terms of the retention of the information, so if it is granted and they consent to it, or whether it's consented or under your normal processes now where you've gone and subpoenaed that, there are already existing policies in place for the retention of that video information, correct?
Yes. I mean, again, it's case specific. And again, it's, dependent upon the type of case in which the crime that's been committed, of how long we would need to retain that data. So, for example, for egregious events such as a homicide or rape, those are cases that are, again, if they're not solved, those cases that would be, retained forever, because, those cases, there is no limitation on the prosecution of said cases. There are other cases that, let's say, there are misdemeanors. Those cases are, we can charge, from those cases, but it's a year and a day from the offense. So we have to be, cognizant, depending upon the solvability of those types of cases. And again, those are rarely, it could be, let's say, for example, you have someone committing vandalisms and spewing hate. For example, spray painting hate signs on property. Well, that being a hate crime can change the dynamic of that particular investigation. But again, it would still be within the confines of the process of our policies moving that forward.
And then if something, it is turned over to the state's attorney's office, et cetera, prosecution happens, and if there's an appeal, I'm assuming that tolls the time for the
that's correct. The courts then dictate to us how long we can hold that particular evidence. And once the courts releases it, says it's no longer needed, then we can, release and basically get rid of that evidence, which we would do that to eliminate any storage capacity issues that we have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. Is every request within a priority area going to be approved until we run out of funding, or is there a decision process for even within the priority areas for who we're going to grant the allowance to?
Well, I think the amount of funding would limit us if we don't have the funding to approve.
Right. I would think so,
I would think that would be that would be an obstacle that we would not be able to possibly approve that particular for that high priority area, depending upon how many requests we will receive.
And there would be equity principles that are applied here, meaning if you had a large, let's say that a large mall applied and asked for a significant chunk of the funds relative to other applications in the jurisdiction, you may not be able to fully fund that full request because it's a large request relative to the total amount of money or what else is being allocated to the area. And so there has to be an equity consideration to make sure that there's equitable access to the funding.
That makes sense. And then I also figure, there could be somebody who asks for a camera because they say they don't feel safe, but when you look at the data, you're like, there's really nothing happening here. And we want everybody to feel safe too, but we also have a limited amount of funding. And so I just want to make sure that you all have a process and the leeway to be able to use the discretion within the priority areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if as Lieutenant Helton noted, that if we have a police reporting area it's not, it does not support, right, that this is a high priority area, that we're not having these events as the person may believe that because that sometimes does happen.
Right.
People think that crime is occurring in a
very
particular
much so.
area,
Yeah,
right?
news
when
is
it's
news and-
right,
yeah.
exactly. So we would be able to explain that to the applicant based upon the data and would show them the data on top of that. So,
Right.
absolutely.
And then I assume we'll get, an angry email and we'll have to.
We probably, all of us will, yes, absolutely, yes.
And then also on the question of discretion, when we were talking about, I remember we had a similar conversation when we were looking at the late night safety bill. I'm sure everybody remembers that discussion there. And decided not to make kind of geographical boundaries there to allow for more discretion within that conversation. And I'm wondering if there would be a benefit to that here as well. If, is every district maybe a priority district, or if we just starting with a wider net? Because, if there's an area, for example, that is not identified as a priority area because there's not a lot happening there, but the same, person with a construction business continues to have their tool shed broken into over and over and over again, we would want to be able to give them a camera, but they might not fall into one of those pre-identified priority districts. So I'm just thinking, if you're already applying some metrics and some common sense within the priority districts, does it make more sense to just let you apply that same level of discretion and those same metrics county-wide, and then assume that you're still going to end up with far fewer cameras in some of those districts that don't have high crime rates, but then having the ability to grant one in the case that it makes sense to do so.
I mean, we're flexible. I mean, we're at the, as the council decides what those, how the availability of the cameras go throughout the county. For example, as Lieutenant Helton noted, every district is not so-called created equal. When we say that, we mean that there's different crime issues in each of our 6 districts. And some that have, higher rates of crime in certain areas that, might be more into the area of this, of the high priority areas that we have already identified. But we also note that we do have crime trends that occur throughout other parts of the county, and each district sometimes go through this. We report out, the commanders report out this to me weekly, and we collectively sit down and come up with strategies to address that. And this might be one of the inclusions in the strategy to make sure that areas who have been impacted by these types of crimes, that we could give them the availability to make sure that they are aware that this program exists, and if they don't have the cameras to support, and to be able to lend a hand to provide the safety net that they need. Yeah, Lieutenant Hamilton.
So also, since we are limited with our resources, being the funding with this, I think it's important that we use data-driven, deployment of this, and we're objective
Yes.
in what we're doing. Because obviously the field parking really gets the emotions involved, and also we have cameras in places that don't necessarily need them. But at the same time, if we do have a spree, or like you talked about, somebody keeps having that incident occurring, those are going to show up on our heat map.
Right.
And every year, at least every year, where do we look at that heat map and determine, hey, should this be a priority now? So it's not going to go unnoticed. And even if it isn't, that's still engagement we're having with that person. We're identifying the crime. There's other ways we can address that as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, for those reasons, I would, for the fact that things change, I mean, you could also change the priority areas, but is that just adding an unnecessary step in the process? I think just something to think about also for the equity reasons as discussed, and as you're kind of leaning towards now also, or hearkening to. The same equity reasons that we discussed with the late night safety bill, if we build those, if we build more barriers and create more extra parameters, that could also have equity impacts. And so just being able to apply the same metrics and the same kind of data-driven approach countywide may make more sense. Also something that we could come back and, if you cast a wide net and include the full county initially, we could come back in a year and you could tell us what makes sense now, or, something along those lines. Do you have an estimated number of requests for the first year? You might not, but I'm just curious. I know that we have a limit of about 1,020 cameras, but I just wondered if you have an anticipation of what might come in here.
I don't think we do, because I think we're going to have some organizations that ask for multiple cameras, and I think that we want to give, because obviously if you have a larger establishment, we thought that was reasonable in that case to have it, but I think I think the reason why we were comfortable with the decision that the council made is because it gave us some flexibility to see what the first quarter looked like before we put in. If we were going to discuss a supplemental funding request to fill it out, we really want to see the data, what kind of applications were coming in, so that you understood. This is the same thing. We've done the same thing with the nonprofit security grants. and we've tried to right-size that program based on the request and the nature of the request and the nature of the request that we were having to deny because of the funding limitations. And so I think that we would use a similar model here where we start with a certain amount of money, and then we start to see how the applications come in, and there's an opportunity to address via supplemental to complete the applications that we've received, as opposed to, we won't automatically deny all the requests. Once we see them, we'll be able to come to the council and say, here's the data of what we've received based on the priority areas. Here's how many cameras would reasonably fit in this program and what we have. And I think that would be able to give us the latitude to right-size the program for what the request.
That makes sense. Also, as we're thinking about right-sizing, to me, that's another reason to potentially go county-wide, at least to start, because if we're only telling residents about this program within those particular areas, we're also not distributing that information equitably. Whereas if we make sure that we're making, that everybody is hearing about it, obviously the requests are going to go through the same metrics, and so everybody's not going to get a yes, but we at least know that we're giving all residents the same opportunities to know about the program and to potentially let their needs be known.
I'll let Lieutenant Helton clarify, but my understanding is what we're going to do is post a map essentially that shows the heat map of the county and the police reporting areas that would fall, and they will. I don't know if every district will have one, but certainly it's likely that every district would have a certain area that qualify based on the calls for service. And so I don't know if Lieutenant can speak to that, but the goal, if there were a district that had a heat area, that district would be included. It wouldn't be an arbitrary saying this PRA that qualified at the highest level is being
So these
ignored.
districts
That's
are
that
very
district.
small, I understand that. Yeah, thanks.
So all 6 of the county police districts have these PRAs that are going to qualify initially, what we've seen so far for the program. So not to get into the weeds of it too much, but on the front end side of it, there'll be a link so residents can see that where the priority areas are. When they put their address in, it'll let them know definitely if they are or not. If they are eligible, then they can proceed to the process. So. Got it. And lastly, when this goes live, when we're confident everything's ready to go, because we want to make sure it works well. We're going to do a big PIO push. There's going to be no doubt. I mean, I've had regional service center directors call me already, 311 reach out already. So people are kind of already getting the idea this is out. But there's going to be no doubt once we go live.
Got it, thanks. One last quick clarification. Per the statute, the department may have access to live or recorded video with the express permission of the applicant or through other legal mechanism. Just wanted to check, does that mean, could that access be granted for blanket monitoring, like live stream monitoring purposes by NCPD or by the county, or would it be limited to individual requests for, particular moments and purposes?
So there are a number of programs that already exist statewide. One is through the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, MCAC, which is called the MView program, where people, synagogues, for example, or schools, WMATA, they all share their feeds with and permit certain access, and the access is defined by the person providing the video. And so the person providing the video would therefore be able to determine who they provide access to and with what regularity and what context they provide it to. And that's an existing program that's long before this, and there are organizations that put their video into that. It would follow essentially the same rules and regulations established for every other video that's coming in.
Would there be new allowances for new, like, businesses? Can and do they do that already?
There are some businesses larger businesses that provide, but MView. But we would. The nice thing about it is it's an existing platform that has an access control system, so that you can prevent inappropriate access of video by partners who are not. The organization knows exactly who has access to their video and when they have access to the video, and that's a key for us to make sure that trust is developed, because people don't want routine surveillance all the time. So.
And I would assume that there are limitations on that to ensure that we're not covering any private property incidentally, and address the privacy concerns that are built into the state.
Correct. That's one of the preconditions of the MView program, is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the questions of my colleagues, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into the process up until this point. And the reality is, according to the math and the packet, this program, limited in scope, will only be able to provide a little more than 1,000 cameras. And so I support the approach that has been presented, that be a data-driven approach, that cameras are provided to residents and businesses that feel they need them based on the data. Full stop. There's only so much money and so many cameras that can be provided. Going deeper into that, regarding the rollout and making sure that everyone has access to the program, it can get complicated because the districts and the police boundaries do not neatly align with zip code, with council districts, with other boundaries that we have created in government. And so I say that as a word of caution, so that however we're able to convey that information in the most understandable way so that it does not create confusion, because the last thing I want is someone thinking that they were eligible, they purchase a camera, and they're deemed ineligible. To me, that's the worst case scenario. And so it is setting realistic expectations with as much information in an understandable way. So I would ask for however our human geography comports to the data, that we be mindful of that. Question about, so the cameras are limited to $250 one-time purchase for a single piece of property, a residential property, and then up to 5 cameras for a business or nonprofit. So that there is no confusion, this program will only support the camera purchase, not the ongoing maintenance fee or subscription. Is that correct? Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Just
Yes.
stating it publicly,
Yes.
so that everyone is aware. And then the only other question I have is regarding to some of the programs that Dr. Stoddard referred to. Here in the county, we do have a faith-based house of worship nonprofit grant with nearly $1 million, give or take in that. I think it's $900,000 now. And that program, that grant, has been used by organizations to purchase cameras. Would they be able to use this in their nonprofit or business capacity to purchase more?
They certainly, yeah, I think the short answer is yes. We haven't prohibited it in any way. So they could obviously, but you'd want to make sure that the camera, it would have to have a different angle. It would have to, the business case would have to exist to have it, as opposed to we want 2 cameras facing, or we're replacing a camera that we purchased with another grant. Mm-hmm. You'd have to be able to make the business case argument that you need the camera based on what's going on in your facility.
I understand that. It's a question that I know will be asked, so I asked it here. Also wanting to make sure that everybody feels safe. If there are already organizations that have cameras that have been provided through county funds, I think we want to be fair and equitable, so a little more consideration.
I think that's a reasonable thing we can include in the application questions. If you receive county funding for another camera program purchase, we can include that as a question, and then if we get clarification from the requester once they submit it.
Again, I ask because I know we're going to be asked. And again, this is a limited program with limited funds, and we want to make sure that it's data-based so that people feel safe in the areas where the data shows they might need a little extra support. So, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you. I would also echo the words of Council President Evan Glass. This must be data-driven and stop. That's it. And I have had, and I'm not going to mention the neighborhoods, but within my district, District 6, quite a few communities asking for updates on this particular program. And I have met with police officers in these communities, and they're eager. They have had many incidents, including carjackings happening and folks vandalizing their cars, and also, so that should be a priority. The other thing is that, since you mentioned, Dr. Stoddard, when you were talking, you mentioned an example with the mall. If you have a mall, it should also be a question on equity. A mall, they're making money. well, at least many of them, not all of them. So if I have to say between a mall and, let's say, an apartment complex, right, where they clearly need, they don't have the funds to, even condominiums in my district, low income, that they just don't have the funds to put these cameras. They go on top of any mall that generates money, okay? So that distinction has to be clear, and I hope it's clear on your end. I just need to hear your words and say.
Yeah, so the reason why I raised, actually I was thinking about Westfield Wheaton when I raised it, because we have had a number of carjackings at that particular, as you well know. And so, you know, your point is incredibly well taken, because I think that, you know, as I mentioned equity before, I think it's going to be extremely important. These dollars are going to be limited. There are going to be likely more requests than there will be dollars to provide. I think that we expect that with just about every program that we offer. But in certain places, for example, if, you know, if Westfield Wheaton made a really compelling case for why they think that we could help prevent more carjackings, for example, at Westfield Wheaton, I think we'd want to be able to hear them out. But your point is extremely well taken, and we would certainly prioritize places that are you know, in an equity framework that have less resources to be able to purchase these otherwise, and in areas where there is not already existing camera coverage. For example, the mall likely already has many. I don't know what their camera situation is, frankly, but I was thinking about that as if there was a business that had a particular set of, because carjackings don't they negatively affect the mall in its process, but it's not being stolen from the mall itself. It's residents who are visiting, and so we're looking for mechanisms that we can protect residents as well. So, yeah, your point is extremely well taken. We will absolutely focus on places that do not have good camera coverage already, and do not have the resources to be able to acquire the cameras as a strong preference in this program. But we don't want to automatically discourage private sector partners from applying where there might be a clear intersection with public interest there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. As often the case, I had a very simple question, but after everybody spoke, it kind of got into a very long, complex one. I just first want to follow up on what Councilmember Fannin-Gonzalez stated. I think the issue, I don't know if there was ever a discussion of means-based eligibility for this, but I think that when you were talking about this, I look at public safety versus protection of property when it comes to larger businesses. And your, Dr. Stoddard, your point about the mall and carjackings, it's quite different if you're looking at shoplifting versus public safety that happens. So I think that would be an important point. However, if we're looking at a large business that could afford cameras and already have cameras, I think that's also a case. So I have two primary issues. One is the rollout and communication to the community. Very often the case with county state government funded grant programs is that people who are in the know and in the circle know that it's there, they get the money before people who might need it much more get it. And I think that this is certainly probably going to be one of those situations when we're talking about very small businesses who just aren't tuned in to what we're doing here at the council. And so I just hope that the rollout, it can be very comprehensive when it comes to our smaller businesses. And I think Council President Glass made an important point about when you do the rollout, talk about, check with us first to make sure that that they get an approval before they go out and buy a camera. So however what your marketing materials talk about, I think that's really important, that we're not giving out free money here, that it's important that they check with that. And then also from the perspective of countywide versus focused areas, I think that the unintended consequences of it being countywide is that areas that are more well-to-do areas might have be more aware of this happening, and so people who might get grants that aren't necessarily the most needy areas. So that's the one issue of communication. The other issue is the issue of priority areas. And I know you're going to identify those areas based on the heat map. Of course, that makes sense. But and reviewed annually. I'm wondering if that, I know that we need certainty in a grant process, and I would assume that a lot's going to depend on whether you roll this out and we have hundreds of applications or thousands of applications versus not. But I would assume that these priority areas shift much quicker than a year's time. And so a priority area that might be happening right now, we have some in my district right now, might shift 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And so the priority areas that you would identify today, are they going to be the same ones 9 months from now?
So I would say, as we've looked at our hotspot maps over the past several years, they have primarily remained consistent. There's really not a lot of, there may be an area that may have some increased activity or decreased activity, right, over the years, but they have really, when you look at the overall maps, you will see consistency along the way based upon the types of crimes that we have identified. So, though I think it will always be a process of review for us to make sure that there's no one's being excluded that needs to be included. I think that's the important part. We know that there are times that certain communities kind of shift in activity, whether it's for the good or for the bad. And I think that's going to really require us to continuously monitor that. Now, we look at all of our commanders are clearly aware of their activities within their particular communities, right? And they do that on literally a weekly basis. They have crime analysts that provide them updated information. Now, if we were to have a series of certain incidents that are occurring that is outside of this crime map, right, that would be very concerning to the entire community. I think that's where we'd have to really give it some serious thought to make sure that, because of this happening at that time and the impact of that, I think it warrants us to give that a lot of consideration, particularly from a standpoint of equity. So.
I would also add that I think this is going to be the first time we're doing something like this in the county. And so I think absolutely, we're absolutely willing to come back to the council and have a conversation once we've seen the implementation and if there's unintended consequences that we can't think of today, then certainly we would be very interested in addressing those either in terms of the bill that was passed or in terms of the regulations that were before you today. And so we don't know what we don't know at this point, and I think we're very interested to put this out on the street, see what the feedback we get from the community is, and if there are places that we identify that really ought to have cameras that are not getting them based on the model, then we have to adapt the model to allow that to happen.
And I would also add, as we talk about, talking about the businesses or the communities that may not hear this information in our public announcement campaign once we put this out. One of the things that other strategies that we utilize within each district is the commanders have community service officers who are directly connected with many communities and the business communities. And when we know that we have a certain crime trend, for example, they are always, for the most part, trying to find ways to better communicate with those communities of such. So whether we're doing it through the Nextdoor app or their neighborhood watch programs that are still active, we would make sure that they are aware of this existing program should they sit in the high priority areas. So.
Thank you. And then once the regulation goes through, how long will it take before the program rolls out?
All eyes on me. So tentatively, I'm shooting for the end of the summer, by September 1st. So the front end, so you got to look at the process in two ways. You have the front end piece, which we can do internally. We have the folks in our technology division can do the programming, do the coding. We can get it just like we want. I've seen a tentative model that we were playing with the application process. The back end part, where it actually has to do with the verification piece, and the personal information that we have, and then coordinating with county finance. That part has to follow certain policies because we're dealing with personal identifying information, and obviously county finance is the one who is going to be sending the rebate check, which is obviously the important piece. Well, all of it's important, but that's very important to folks. So we want to make sure it's done correctly. We want to make sure it's done right before we get this off, because I think it's going to be very popular. So that's why I'm giving September 1st as a tentative date for now.
Thank you. We were talking about the various priority areas. Just this weekend, as you pointed out, Chief, we had major incidents in Montgomery Village, in Germantown, had one this morning in Bethesda, and that's the ones that I know. I have a feeling you know about a few more than I do, Chief. So we have issues in a variety of places, and to each degree, there's a different degree on what we need to be trying to do. But to Councilmember Balcom's point, communication really is a key. And if possible, and I know you all are stretched thin, but if possible, if we could have a review more than just annually. If you could come back and say, look, and I think everybody made this point, that we could buy 1,000 of these, but we really, if we had the money, we would have bought X more, then I think we need to know that as quickly as we can. Not to say that we'll have the money necessarily, but we need to make sure that what we're doing is right. And I think it's necessary to point out that for the heat maps that you talked about, Lieutenant, that they also include our federal partners and Maryland State Police. I mean, that all of the municipalities, that all of those areas are aware of this type of program. It would be our program, but if there's a problem that they're handling, then I think it would be to everyone's benefit that they know it as well, that's what we're after. I mean, let's face facts, cameras, it wasn't too many years ago that you had a camera and somebody was walking around like this gentleman over here with that size of a camera. Today, there's not one person more than likely on the street that doesn't have a camera in their pocket. I mean, just we have body-worn cameras, we have cameras everywhere, and this is another tool in the toolbox. Now, and I agree that the pre-approval is something that someone should not go out and spend their money unless they have been pre-approved, or we're going to spend that money anyhow for that camera and figure that, I'll ask if I get it, I get it. But I think we need to have that. And the county-owned cameras that are like in Silver Spring or wherever, that's not part of this program. So that's everything that we're doing here in addition to those issues. And then I guess the final thing that I'm going to bring up here is how are we going to measure success? And that's on the packet that Ms. Farag has always done a wonderful job on. But in some cases, success is that we don't have any problem. Success is that we had an issue, the community came together, however it worked, and we haven't had anything or very few since then. To me, that's a success as well. And the other thing that we have seen is that with cameras, it depends on the angle. In my house, I have four. Sally has four cameras around my house, and there's still one area, and we're going to get another one. There's still one area which we get to see the deer pretty regularly, but there's one area that we didn't. And not that I have a concern for safety. I have a concern for safety, but not in that way. I have to tell you that just because somebody has 4 cameras doesn't mean they don't need 6 in order to, and so we have to keep that in mind. And we need to make certain their business partners are truly partners. That, you know, they only have X amount of money, and so do we, and so we need to work together. Ms. Frog, is there anything else we need to work through this? You have something else? Oh, Lori Ann, before you, Councilmember Sales, please. I'm sorry, I did not see you throwing, see, you can't throw something from me through the screen, so anyhow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to first thank Susan for putting the packet together, and Chief Jones and Lieutenant Helton for joining us along with Dr. Stoddard to answer these questions. I agree this is a good program, but the regulations seem a bit vague, and I don't know if we're going to be more precise once we do more engagement. And I know that Councilmember Balcom just asked about the types of engagement that we have had. And Chief Jones, you mentioned that you're putting this information probably on some neighborhood listservs, but I don't know if there's been any communication with our Economic Development Corporation, our chambers, so that they can ensure that this is actually getting directly to businesses and they're aware of what's going to be available, how much it'll cost, and why their particular areas are being identified as priority areas. Just wanted to see if you can provide more insight onto what the regulations, when they'll be more specific, and any intention to work with our current businesses, the chambers and the corporation, to get this information shared once this passes.
Absolutely, Councilmember Sales. We are clearly dedicated to making sure that we reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, as well as working with the County Executive's Office to make sure that there is messaging that is pertinent to those individual businesses throughout the areas that we've identified, and to give them as much information as possible. I think there's a variety of ways that we communicate, whether we're doing it through our public information office that will utilize that as a avenue, but we'll also, like I stated, we'll utilize more within our each of the districts. Not only do we have the community service officers, but you have the officers who work in the particular police beats that they're communicating with businesses as they address public safety issues within the particular beats that which they work. So, whether it's in a more urban type of an environment, or even if it's out more of the suburban part of our county, we still have issues significant to crime, right? So as we, often we will, do an investigation and find that a business doesn't have cameras, as an example, or it's antiquated. And sometimes officers have those conversations with the business owners to talk about, other safety tools, or these types of this type of equipment that can help assist them with their security, as an example. Some take it to heart and they will go and invest on their own, right? And then some, as we know, that may not have the funds to do so because of the very nature of their business. This will assist us with communicating, and we'll make sure that all of the officers who work in those beats can also be a voice to get this information out. So, we have not specifically talked about sort of our marketing campaign, you might say, but clearly, having discussed this with you all, I think we will create one and come up with a strategy to make sure that this information is spread as best as we can.
Can I add one thing, because I want to speak to the specificity question that you raised. And so when we develop, obviously as we go from what's in the law to the regulation to the actual application and what's on the page, the goal is to get more specific, but obviously you want the application, you don't want everything to be so constrained by the regulation and or the law that's passed that you don't have the flexibility on the application side to be able to tailor it to what we've heard here today, but also the feedback that we're going to get through this engagement process that we're going to go through. So the application process will much more clearly spell it. Something I heard today that I think is important that we clarify is the goal is going to be to focus on public safety, not necessarily solely on crime prevention or things like or theft prevention, for example, where there is a clear business interest in that, but we want to prioritize public safety so that everyone can benefit from it too. So that will be clearly stated on the application process of the criteria, and we'll have to figure out how we, in the application process, answer that question of how we appropriately collect information to address that question. We've also heard about a pre-approval process. I think that's a reasonable thing, given that you don't want people to outlay the money and then not be certain about it. So we'll talk about that as well. But we certainly agree that there needs to be more specificity in the actual application process, because you don't want people applying for, we're thinking they're eligible for something that they're not based on the application. And so we'll specify further with the application for sure. And the last thing I will say is, and Chief Jones got to this with this campaign, so business community, public generally, absolutely multilingual. So obviously we're going to make sure we cover everyone with our messaging. We have as the regional service centers have already been super engaged and hear about this issue. They'll be a great conduit. The Office of Community Partnerships will be a great conduit. The Business Center and the Economic Development Corporation. We've got a lot of partners who will make aware. The chambers are obvious. We know that not all businesses are part of chambers, but there are many businesses part of chambers. So we'll make sure that we're diversifying who knows about it and how we know about it. Then frankly, we'll, as it gets closer to the September 1st timeline of hopefully launching, we'll put together something very overt and partner with our friends from the media to make sure that people are well aware of the opportunity.
Good. And Jean from the Small Business Center as well. So thank you, gentlemen. I have to run, but look forward to continuing this discussion.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Farag. I'm turning Ms. Farag.
I just wanted to build on a lot of the conversation that you've just had and the questions you've just had. And if the joint committee wishes, perhaps we could request that the police department provide a written report at the end of August that outlines their eligibility framework in more precision, the application process, even a screenshot of the website, and more information on the public information campaign that they intend to use, and then come back in November with a written report on how it's going, how many applications, that type of thing. And depending on the information you get back, it may warrant another joint committee meeting. So.
That's fine with me. How about with the police? Can you do that time frame? Ms. Frog is concerned that you had nothing else to do, Lieutenant.
We'll make it work. We'll absolutely make it work.
Can we frame it as the month before the application goes live and the quarter thereafter it launches? Because if it doesn't launch, I'm just a little bit concerned about making sure it aligns with it.
We don't. I mean, it doesn't have.
We're going to go aiming for September 1st, but
Ms. Frog is very tough, but she's not that tough. She'll give you a couple days.
So I appreciate that September 1st. It might be the first time we've publicly stated a date for when this is supposed to go live. So that's really important, and we still have a few months to lead up for it. With regard to the information, I think the most important part to understand is that we need this information because we are going to be inundated by constituents who are asking to participate. And so it's making sure your ducks are in a row so that we can respond properly to our residents. I don't know whether it's pessimism or optimism, but I think the other timelines are going to be moot, because I think the applications for this program are going to go so quickly that whether we have a quarterly update or a semi-annual update, the funds and the requests for those funds will move within a matter of days or weeks. And so making sure that we have our ducks in a row, making sure that we have the information to share with residents so that they can feel safer in our community is paramount. That's the purpose of this program, and I'm glad we've been able to work through a number of these issues this morning.
Thank you for that. I also think, I don't know whether it's optimism or pessimism either, but I think this is where we need to really think about the outcome and success of the program, because if this program is oversubscribed, which I think it probably will be if we do our job in marketing, If, however, we look at this program and it's highly successful in helping the police department do its very important job, then as a council, we need to look at where we're going to find additional funding for more reimbursements. So I think that the number of applications we get, the number of reimbursements we get, we need to have that outcome measures to see how we're going to go forward with it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the key outcomes is obviously going to be not just crime prevented, but also crime solved in areas where we deploy the camera program. And so that will take that will take some time to get the data. We could say, oh, we reimburse this amount of money, but that's a reporting point, not a point of success. And so I think that, and frankly, we're doing this already with some of the camera platforms that we've seen out in the public. We're trying to assess have we seen a reduction in crime in those areas, or we've seen a higher closure rate of crime in those areas because of the evidence provided by those cameras. And we're doing the same thing with license plate readers. We had a robust conversation about the drone as a first responder program. There are a lot of places where technology is being utilized to enhance public safety, and the onus is on us to pull together the information that articulates how those programs have been implemented and the successes in which they're proceeding, not just in Montgomery County, but if we're trying to base it on a model somewhere else, we want to make sure we can articulate the successes they have seen and what we are hoping to replicate here in Montgomery County.
Ms. Frog, it is my understanding we need to suggest that we approve these regs to the council. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just wanted to note my appreciation for that exchange there. I think it's super important to be data-driven. I think that's really helpful for our conversations with the public also, and when there's funding questions and being able to articulate and explain, it's just really helpful for us to continue having those conversations, and also being able to, compare the success from this program or that program to this effort or that effort is just helpful across the board for tech stuff and for other places where we're thinking about where do we need to staff up. So all of these conversations, very helpful, and so appreciate the focus on data and analytics there. Thanks.
So we need thank you. We need
A motion to approve. I'm making one.
Please, hello.
Motion to approve the regulation.
Okay.
Second.
Second has been moved and seconded that we approve the executive regulations, or recommend that we approve the executive regulations for 0423 to the full council. All those in favor, please raise your hand, and even I can count that high. Thank you very much. It is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being with us. Okay, thank you.